Hello, my name is Shaun O'Brien and I'm a product manager with the Oracle Development Tools Group, and the topic we're going to be covering today is Oracle Application Development Framework development inside of Eclipse. So, as a quick overview, what we're going to be covering in this presentation is an introduction to the Oracle Enterprise Pack for Eclipse, or OEPE as we call it. Then necessarily an overview of Oracle ADF to fill in some of the details for those of you that are not quite yet familiar. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with a demonstration of ADF actually being developed inside of Eclipse. So let's take a look at the Oracle Enterprise Pack itself. The Oracle Enterprise Pack is a certified plugin to the Eclipse IDE. It was something that Oracle developed as a means of enabling Java development and enterprise as well as other Java development inside of Eclipse using Oracle runtimes, being able to leverage some of the power that is brought through the Oracle framework development exposed through the Eclipse IDE. So, for example, one of the things we would see is that trying to broaden the selection of IDEs, we saw a lot of powerful development being done utilizing the Oracle JDeveloper interface, which is extremely popular, but was also calls for people that liked the ADF framework but wanted to have the opportunity to be able to make use of it in other IDEs such as Eclipse. So we went ahead and developed this as a means of enabling that. What it also allows then is the capability to continually advance this to keep pace with some of the features that are being exposed through the Oracle development, as well as a lot of the different features that are exposed through the Red Stack or the Oracle technology stack. The target audience that we've got here is very wide and diverse. For example, we have standard edition, enterprise edition Java development, people that just wanted to develop regular Java web applications, things that are EJBs APA with a Java server faces front end. We have web service development, whether it's just simply doing standard web services or ones that are, for example, REST web services or SDO web services. We also then kind of leveraged capability for doing basic development against the Oracle database. In addition, we have administrative capabilities for some of the different containers, such as adapters that are built into OEPE for management of the WebLogic suite, or GlassFish, or, for example, the newly released Oracle ADF Essentials that we're going to see in this presentation. So the key differentiators that we've got as far as it comes to making use of OEPE are things such as the ability to detect potential runtime errors at design time. So we're able to shortcut some of the development cycle. For example, things that we would normally have to go ahead and develop and then debug them as we run into issues. There are things where there are key features inside of OEPE that we'll see that will allow us to actually detect those issues while still at design time instead of actually waiting until we are out and debugging. Another big thing is the capability to understand large J2E applications, whether they're existing or under development. That's provided to us by a feature that is called AppXRay. It's something else that we will see as well during this presentation. It allows us to actually examine and see the relationships between elements up and down through the application stack, and is extraordinarily helpful when trying to comprehend and understand all of the various relationships inside of some of these applications. And finally, it allows you to unify your Oracle Eclipse development efforts. This is provided by a variety of different things, such as our integration of the Maven toolset. So if we take a look at OEPE 12.1.2 at a glance, The different horizontal bars we have here obviously show the stacks, the stack of technologies that we have inside of Eclipse as we progress towards the actual OEPE product itself. So we've got the basic, Eclipse platform where we've got the Java development tools and the annotation processor. And then moving onwards, we see the Web Tools platform for JSF, or the Dolly persistence tools, as well as the web page editor and Eclipse Link. Each of those provide a variety of different features that are then that we then extend on into the OEPE realm as we move upwards. But a key thing to understand also, while this is in front of us, is the fact that those four technologies that we've got in the web tools are actually efforts that are led by teams here at Oracle. And again, important to note that Oracle is a leading contributor to the Eclipse Link, or I'm sorry, the Eclipse Foundation. And then if we move up a horizontal again, we start seeing, now that we've layered some of the more Oracle-specific technologies onto those. So we've added in the Oracle runtimes, development of Java web apps that are keyed specific to being exposed through OEPE. So again, the features that we have for being able to do enterprise Java being development and testing and exposure. Web services for things doing, as I said before, for standard or advanced web service development. A key element inside of here then that we have, and a key focus for this, is then the exposure of the application development framework, which is going to be the key element that we're going to be covering in this presentation going forward. AppXRay as well, being able to provide us with the visual relationship evaluation of elements inside of our application. The Oracle DB tools, so rolling in some of the stuff from SQL Developer and stuff like that, as well as the object relational mapping tools that we then have as well, putting an extension onto Eclipse Link to allow us to be able to do our database mapping. So all of this rolled together is kind of the technology hierarchy that we have when we're building our way up towards the OEPE add-on that we have, or the OEPE extension that was built out for allowing us to do this type of development within Eclipse. It's also key to note that because we keep things so modular like this, that it allows us to be able to continue to expand on this again, as I said before, and keep the plugin current with the state of Oracle technology, as well as the advancing suite of Java technology and other capabilities that are brought into this. If we go ahead and took a look at this slide just by itself, we get your typical IT experience of having just alphabet soup of acronyms thrown at you. And while that can be head spinning at times, it also means that we have kept it flexible enough that we are continuing to adapt and build out and add on to these different features into the expansion as we move forward. So here we see AppXRay, and as I said before, AppXRay allows us to do relationship modeling inside of Eclipse, or inside of OEPE. And what this really does then is we can see some of the different sources that we're able to take from, able to obviously take from the Java stack within Fusion middleware, whether it is standard Java, Java EE, or even an ADF application. We can bring in coherence, and the way that this is then done, one of the things that AppXRay allows us to do is not only to diagram relationships between application artifacts, so this class and this class are related by a have a relationship to each other and are bound to each other. That's fairly obvious inside of the code, and it's something that can be extracted pretty easily. But one of the other things that AppXRay allows us to do is even just with configuration files. So the XML files and stuff that allow us to describe coherence relationships is something that then AppXRay can also understand, interrogate, and show us information for. We get out to our containers, whether it's WebLogic or GlassFish or what have you. It also then will go up and interrogate some of those files, so the WebLogic XML config file and things like that, where it will see, okay, what are the relationships do we have in here, and if I make a change in one area, how is that related to other items down the line? It also allows us, as we'll see, to move through and drill down into these relationships, whether it's stuff for Spring, again, so other ones we've got for our frameworks or related frameworks, from the ORM, or general object relational mappings, the database relationships, and things like that. Even going through the standard tiers, we can see that we can interrogate just plain Java objects, Eclipse links objects, EJBs, the ADF model. Moving up through presentation tier, we can see all the different components that are necessary for things like ADF Task Flows, and again, tying in and combining configuration files and resource bundles, and even a variety of different even presentation layer technologies, where we're looking at just standard HTML files, the CSS files that are then backing both HTML or JSF apps, JSP apps, then obviously the ADF Faces extension to JSF, just all sorts of different files and components that can be aggregated up inside of AppXRay, and ultimately they're all treated as artifacts. So just whatever the file or component is, AppXRay treats it as a element within AppXRay as an artifact, and then allows us to drill in and examine those artifacts. So as I had said before, OEPE allows us also to do management of some of the containers that we've got. For example, we've got the WebLogic server adapter. Now, the server adapter allows, for example, for us to, through OEPE, go ahead and integrate with what would typically be things that we would run through the administration console in WebLogic. Things like being able to do run, deploy, and debug, both locally and remotely. It allows us to go through and examine the libraries that are deployed for a particular application. We're able to do fast swap in there, be able to examine the SCA and the SCA utilizing the WebLogic SCA tools. It also provides us with WLST tooling. So for those of you that have been through and actually used WLST, it's basically the WebLogic scripting tool. So things where you would interface with that, and then you could do scripts that would allow you to start and stop servers, or do update of particular clusters and things like that. You can do a lot of the WLST integration directly through the WebLogic server adapter, which makes things a lot easier. In addition, we have the runtime migration tool, which if we've got one version of WebLogic that we're deployed against and want to deploy against a new one, it will allow us actually to go ahead and do an examination of the impact of that deployment between one version to another. So being able to see, what would be the impact on this from one version to another, and it will actually identify, here are some of the areas that you may have issues with, whether it's a WebLogic XML issue or a deployment descriptor difference or whatever. It's something that the server adapter will allow you to bring up and identify before actually going ahead and trying to do that migration. And one of the nice features of this also is that the server adapter supports all versions of WebLogic Server up through the current one. So very effective and great for being able to provide access to developers on the front lines to have access to certain features of the admin console without giving them full administrative rights to be able to log into the admin console directly. We also have support for GlassFish. And the GlassFish server plugin that we've got allows you to go through a variety of different features as well, very similar to the WebLogic server adapter as well. With GlassFish, we're able to go ahead and go through the configuration wizard. We're able to manage the projects inside of GlassFish, whether we want certain projects available or unavailable or there for deployment. It shows us, the deployment, a listing of the different web services we've got in there, as well as resources that are available for particular applications or just the container in general. We have access to our server logs as well as features in the admin console for GlassFish. In addition, inside of there we have the GlassFish web application facet, and this is another facet that then is brought to the Eclipse tool itself. And if we go ahead and enable the GlassFish web app facet, it goes ahead and adds in the GlassFish libraries to our build path and sets up tools for Java EE. So if we decide that, hey, we're going to be doing our development and our targeted server is going to be GlassFish, we go ahead and can just add the GlassFish facet into our development environment, and it sets all that stuff up for us ahead of time. So it kind of shortcuts the development curve for getting things set up for doing development against GlassFish. And again, it's supporting for GlassFish 3.1 and 4.0. And is really a very beneficial element to have available to us through OEPE to enable us to utilize GlassFish as a deployment target. And one of the things that we'll see as well going forward is that it's part of one of the targeted stacks that we've got utilizing the OEPE toolset with ADF and deploying ADF to ADF Essentials on GlassFish provides us with a what's referred to as a free to deploy stack that we can make use of to leverage some of the features of the ADF toolset or ADF framework inside of a prototyping or free to deploy environment. So Oracle ADF Essentials, referred to earlier. ADF Essentials is something that we've had under development for a while. One of the things that has been called for is previously to do deployment of ADF, you had to have a licensed environment, basically WebLogic. And there was the desire, particularly, and it's relevant when we're talking about going into a Eclipse environment where OEPE is going to be living, that we would want to try to bend ourselves more towards the open source community, where it's stuff that we like to have, low cost of ownership and the ability to do a lot of rapid prototyping and development of applications in a very agile manner. ADF Essentials gives us the ability to put a stack together that is completely free to deploy and utilize inside of this environment. So what ADF Essentials is it allows us to take the ADF framework and go ahead and deploy it into a container such as GlassFish, as was mentioned earlier, and make use of it in that fashion. Essentially, ADF Essentials is the standard ADF, or is the existing ADF framework with some of the features pared down. So some of some of the more advanced features would be unavailable in this framework, but the bulk of them are being exposed. And again, so contains the core capabilities from Oracle ADF, and provides all of the benefits that we would see from ADF. So here we see exactly what we would get inside of the ADF Essentials features itself. We have either standard JSF or ADF Faces. The controller, we can make use of the standard JSF or the ADF controller. We still have the binding layer. We get the business services, as well as our Java Business Service or REST Web Service, or the Web Service Data Control, and exposure of EJB JPA. And from the data services tier, we can still make use of all of the data services that we made use of previously inside of Essentials as well. So overall, a lot of the features that are necessary at the core of ADF are still being provided. So here we see now a breakdown of what exactly we see in ADF Essentials versus the overall Oracle ADF. So again, we've got all the elements that we see in green here that we talked about previously, and now we see the elements in here in blue that are not provided. So as far as from the business services area, we don't have the ability to integrate with a lot of the SOA suite components. So web services, BAM, Beeple, BI, or portlets, those things are not going to be available for us in Essentials. We're not going to have access to ADF Mobile in Essentials. The metadata services and ADF security are also not going to be there, as well as our desktop integration. So yes, there are going to be areas that are not going to be provided, but again, if you look at it, really the core of Oracle ADF is provided for inside of Essentials. It's really just the more advanced components that we're not going to see. And in reality, if we were making use of elements within the SOA suite, you would really think that we already would be licensing into that area anyway. So if we had the SOA suite licensed, it's more than likely that we've got licensing available for the full ADF stack itself, and not having to really worry about making use of a free to deploy stack like the Essentials stack. The one area that might be potentially useful and is not included is definitely the ADF security stack. So in an area that's an area where we have the core development products that are going through from the ADF stack, but you may actually want to be able to secure those as well. So without ADF security being included as part of Essentials, that could be something that could potentially be a very strong motivator to consider going with the full stack. There are also elements, for example, with mobile that we may actually do some of the core development, deploy it to Essentials, and say, hey, we would like this to be mobile. Well, now we might want to look at doing the full stack. And of course, if you did the full stack and licensed everything out, it is perfectly easy to go ahead and take an Essentials ADF app and move it to the full stack. It would just move seamlessly across. So the ADF Richfaces client components have over 150 AJAX and HTML5 enabled components. It's a very pluggable look and feel for those of you that are familiar with making use of the rich client components. They can be extremely powerful, very robust in the manner in which they can deliver different data. For example, if we look here at the UI components, we've got the standard UI components, and we've got things that come out from the DBT framework for the data visualization stuff. Things like charts, Gantt charts, the geomap, which is very cool, pivot charts, calendars, things like that. Also have built-in functionality for being able to do a drag and drop framework, dialoguing and pop-ups, the active data as well as dashboards, which is very cool. With the active data framework, it's something that was developed to solve the issue of latent data. So what active data does, it actually opens a micro connection to the data service that's being monitored, and as that data changes, it provides immediate updates back to the component that's in the UI. This was initially developed to provide support for the BAM data control. And as that data is extraordinarily volatile and very sensitive to time change, it's something that provided a unique challenge to being solved, and the solution to that was the active data framework. The ADF controller is a extension of the JSF page flow controller, or page flow engine, or the JSF controller. It allows us to define flows of pages, as well as one of the key things that the ADF controller provides for us with its state management is the ability to actually define the ADF task flows, which is really a really powerful thing. It provides us with the ability to define all of this in a very declarative way, declaratively and visually. So we can do drag and drops and diagram out these different components. It also provides us with the ability to control things such as how the back button is going to react when it's pressed, whether we want it to actually allow the user to do a back or do something else. So here we see actual task flow development. And here we've got a bounded task flow that's under development. And when we go ahead and define out the different elements inside of the task flow, those elements are then backed by either a page that is defined by that element, an activity that that element may be referencing, a call out to another task flow, or any other item that we want to have as an executable. Once we define those task flows, we can then either have that task flow run on its own, or we can go ahead and, as I said before, have nested task flows where one task flow calls another, and that relationship can build on and on and on. And once you've got a task flow that you're ready to make use of, you can go ahead and then take that task flow and just drop it into a region on a page. So what this does is it's very similar to the notion of developing a wizard. So each of the elements inside of a task flow you could think of as like a page in a wizard. And as we define these going forward, then we're defining these reusable segments of, or these chunks of functionality or processes within our application or organization. And as we've got those task flows defined and bottled up, then we can go ahead and set them aside and make reuse those throughout an application wherever that that process becomes relevant or necessary. Things as simple as a login and logout procedure, or something as complex as the resolution of a loan application process. So we can go to any degrees making use of these task flows, and it's very effective. Next we have the data binding framework, which is the ADF solution to JSR 227. It provides us with a unified binding solution for allowing us to bind a front end to a back end. And so, why would we be doing this? Well, the key motivator behind this is to keep things loosely coupled and to promote reusability. So what we've got by implementing the data binding framework is the fact that you've got a UI that references components based on a annotation shorthand, or I'm sorry, an expression language shorthand. And then the backend then provides data elements that are keyed to those as well. So if we have a front end that says that it wants employee.firstname for this field, and then we've got a data element on the back end that provides an employee object that has a first name field, the data binding framework can then correlate those entries. Now the power behind this is, say that we change from a database access framework where we're going to go ahead and provide that data element through a standard business component to something where now we want to provide it through a web service invocation. So we're going to call out to a centralized web service to get these elements. All we have to do is change the data tier and change it from a database access to a web service access. And as long as the definition of those data elements remains the same, the UI won't have to change. It just goes ahead and continues to bind to those same data elements going forward. So with the development tools, one of the things that's really powerful to note here is that we have JDeveloper as well as the Enterprise Pack for Eclipse deployed inside of Eclipse, and very similar in look and feel. When we went towards developing the Enterprise Pack, we wanted to try to remain as close to the look and feel that we had in JDeveloper as possible. So that goes forward to then the ADF 12.1.2 support that we've got. We provide support for the ADF project templates, the Faces components and facelets, as well as the enhanced task flow tools. We have support for the binding editor and definition, as well as the data control editor. We're able to, again, deploy and debug both against WebLogic Server and GlassFish, and have very rich design time tools for the ADF 12.1.2, as well as then being able to leverage these into ADF Essentials and making use of, again, that free to deploy stack that is provided there. So very effective and very popular with being able to continually stay abreast of the changes that are coming out with the ADF framework and keeping it as current as possible, as well as continuing to move forward with optimizing that for doing ADF development inside of Eclipse. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at a demonstration of doing this ADF development, or doing ADF development utilizing OEPE. So here we go ahead and we say new ADF application. And this will allow us to create a new application workspace based on ADF. We go ahead and give the application a name. And here we'll name it HR app. We go ahead and then we're going to define a new JPA project for this, which is going to give us our back end. We'll specify a JPA EE configuration and say next. Now we're into defining our JPA facets, and we're going to select a connection that we created previously to an Oracle Express database. Ask if we want to change the facet that we're using, and we're saying no. Click through the other panels, leave it as is, and say finish. So now it's setting everything up and giving us the basics behind our application workspace. So the next step that we're going to do is go ahead and start creating our model components. So we go over to our model and we can see the different elements that are exposed in here. We've got the persistence XML file that we can open up and visually examine. Has a variety of different elements in there that we can modify, both through the dialogues there, as well as we can always go into a source view for it and edit it directly. So we're going to go to JPA Tools, and we're going to tell that we want to generate entities from tables. I'm going to select the tables that we would like to generate the entities from. Say Next, and it will show us the relationships between those entities. We can also modify these relationships at that point if we'd like to. Add new ones or alter the ones that are existing. Now we can go in and do customization. We're going to leave things as is. But you can see for each of the different ones, we can see the elements that are going to be in each of the different entities. And again, this would be the place that we could do editing for those as well. Click Finish. And it will have created our source for these entities. Next, we're going to go ahead and create a session bean to front these. We'll go ahead and give it a class name, and I think we'll call it the HR Facade. Leave it as a stateless session bean type. We're going to need to select the different entities that we want fronted by this facade. And then we go ahead and click Finish, and it goes ahead and creates the session facade with the EJBs rolled up underneath it. We see our facade object, as well as the local and remote interfaces provided by it. The next thing we're going to do is create a ADF Task Flow. So we go to our web app and say New ADF Task Flow. We give the task flow a name and click Finish. And now we have our task flow pane. We can go ahead and do a bunch of view options. And we're going to go ahead and enable the grid and start dragging over activities. So we'll grab a couple of view activities here. The first one that we're going to have is just going to be for search. And this next one will provide us with a graph representation of the data we search for. We're going to do the control flow cases to do a search and return. Get everything laid out nicely. And with these control flow cases defined, we can then go ahead and begin to define the elements that are backing them. So by double-clicking on that activity, we can now tell that we want to create a page fragment to back this. We'll leave it named as search. We'll go ahead and define a layout utilizing the ADF Page Layouts, the templates that we were talking about earlier. We'll start with a 2-column layout. We see it's got a generalized structure on the top and then a more specific one on the bottom that shows us that our right panel is going to be expandable and our left element will be collapsible with a splitter. And that all child components in our right-hand panel will be stretched to fill. Now it creates the page for us. We'll go ahead and do the same thing for our graph component. This time we'll use a one column layout that's just going to stretch everything in its body to full. Okay. And so let's start with the search page, and we're going to change the splitter orientation from a horizontal one to a vertical, making use of the property inspector to do so. And note that it went ahead and updated that in our visual editor, or in our source editor. Next, we'll click on the facade. We're going to say that we want to create an ADF data control out of our facade. Or not. So next we click on our facade and say we want to create an ADF data control out of it. And here we can go ahead and name our data control. So we'll call it our HR control. It gives us different options for configuration of that. And we click finish. It tells us what it's created. And it takes us into our data control listing and shows us the HR data control and the elements that are inside of it. Should look very familiar to anyone who's ever worked with data controls in JSF. We'll go to our search panel and open up our first facet. Get the code set up so it's ready for us to put something in there. And we'll go to our data controls and see that we've got our HR control now. And we'll drag departments find all over to here. And it's going to ask us what we want that displayed as. We'll say an ADF read-only form. And clip out some of the display elements here so that we keep our result set manageable. We can add navigation and submit button. And it goes ahead and generates all the code for us. Next, we're going to drill into that control and take this sub-element of employees out of there as well. And we'll display those as a table. So what we'll be able to see is the employees of the department that's being viewed. And again, go through and trim the fields that are coming back from it so that we only have the relevant ones. I'll make this one read-only too. Let's save all. And we'll go down here, select our search page, and allow it to show AppXRay. And now this allows us to see the AppXRay evaluation of this. And you see we can drill into each of the different elements. So we see the search JSF and the actual by name for department name. We can drill into that and see the iterator that's backing that department name. And then, pardon me, the data control that's then fronting that, as well as the adapter that comes off of that. We can even see the actual code iterator that's behind it as well, and we could click on that to go directly to the page def to see the page definition for that page as well. So as you see, and if we wanted to go back, we can always click the back button, and it takes us right back to AppXRay, and we can continue drilling at that point. It's very effective at being able to again, view the relationships, but not just view them, also navigate through them. And if we wanted to return to the page, we can just go back in here and click the page element. We're back. So again, imagine being able to do that and seeing, top to bottom, very, very large and complex applications, and allowing us to navigate through them in that way to see the relationships between all these different elements. In an n-size graph like that. It's very, very effective. We can also go ahead and use code complete to select elements inside of this tag here. So we can add an action to our submit button, or we can go down to the property inspector and locate the action and simply click on this dialog here to select the view action from our task flow, and it inserts that for us. Save all. So a couple of options for us to be able to do editing as well. Let's go back to our data controls. And now we're actually going to go to our graphing page, and let's see a layout of the employees once we've selected our department. And we'll create a graph out of this to show some of the DVT components. So we drag it over, select a graph. We'll select a horizontal bar graph. And now we're going to need to define our bars and the y-axis. So on the y-axis, we're going to have the employee's name. And for the bars, we'll go ahead and display their salary levels. So a nice graphical evaluation of our employees' salaries per department. We're also going to need a button to allow us to return back to our search page. So we'll create this as a back button. And it has the action definition right here, and we'll select the return action. Save all. And now we're going to need to create the containing page for this task flow. So up until this point, we've been creating the components that compose the task flow. So they've been page fragments. Now we're going to actually create a specific page, which we can then drag our task flow into and embed it as a region. So we go ahead and we grab our task flow, drag it up to the page, say that we want to drop it as a region, and it goes ahead and creates that tag element for us. Save all. And now we can go ahead and run our new page. We'll run on server. And so now it goes ahead and deploys our application into our WLS container, starting it up. And here's our page. So we've got the ability to go ahead and navigate through the different departments utilizing the next, previous, first, and last controls. And as we navigate through there, we'll see the different employees that are listed out inside of that department. Once we've found a department that we like, we can go ahead and hit the submit button, which will then navigate us to our graphing page, which will show us a breakdown of the employees in that department with their salaries broken down. So we'll go ahead, and this one looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and select the submit button. And it goes ahead and shows us the graphing data for each of the individual people and their salary. When we're done with that, we can click back, and it will take us back. And there we go. So, that concludes the demonstration. To get more information on ADF or to continue to follow the evolution of OEPE, feel free to join the ADF community at oracle.com/ADF, or to follow the OEPE Twitter feeds or the OEPE's Facebook page. They also are available on the Google community, and we have a special item that we have on YouTube, which is the ADF Insiders. You can find those at youtube.com/ADF Insider Essentials. And once again, thank you for your interest and your attendance at this Virtual Developer Day. Have a good day.